It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, October 28th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that says you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You could find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, so much has happened in the last few days for us to get to. We're going to try to get to all of it on the show. Rewinding a little bit, the big news over the weekend, Jett Luchanko sent back to Guelph in the OHL. I think, as we talked about, we agree 100% with this decision. They weren't really playing him regularly at this point, and we thought that it was better for his development, right?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you would have sent him back right coming off that road trip. He could have just gone straight to Guelph. That was ideal. But for whatever reason, they were kind of waiting on John to say he wasn't going to use him. And, I just thought, wow, it's kind of weird that it went down to like that last day and he was the extra skater at practice. It's like, okay, like, what are we doing here? It's like, so yeah, ultimately it's the right decision. We'll see how he does this year. Again, he's not on the most talented team, but he's still going to have to, do the best he can with that. Maybe he'll get traded, maybe he won't. And then you worry about next year.
Right, and I certainly hope he does get traded to a better
Hmm.
OHL team, maybe London perhaps.
Yeah.
But, that would be fun. But I think that he just needs an opportunity to be in a better
Yeah.
situation in junior, and that could have played into delaying it a little bit because which is a worse situation in terms of.
Yeah. But it was going to be that
you
way
know
no matter what, though,
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. So, yeah, I get it, but, I think that what Brier had to say about it was spot on, and what we've been saying all along,
Yeah.
just to give him time to get ready to be in the NHL and really understand what he has to get better at in order to be successful at
The
the
only thing, though, there was one
level.
thing with Briere that is hard to do. He's asking Luchanko to go back there and score goals. And I pointed out to somebody next to me that had they even said that to Claude Giroux, it took him getting a shooting coach and everything else to kind of get to that 30 goal mark. And that was like 5 years into his career. So just because you tell a guy, go ahead and be chancier, score more goals, the minute he gets put on Team Canada, they want him for his playmaking. So
Right.
it's not going to just magically happen. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that has to happen over a little more time.
Sure, but he has a lot of time to develop, so
Well, he
I
may
think
not.
that
Like, if he plays with the Flyers next year, then he's going to have to do that, starting then.
we'll see how that plays out. Unfortunately, Cam York out 2 weeks minimum. He's on IR right now. As we saw, Eric Johnson went into the lineup on Saturday
Going to be a
in
lock
his
to be over
place.
50 games, don't you think?
Well, you said it, and I was skeptical, and we'll see. I think, Emil Andrae getting the call up
Yeah.
and checking in on Sunday is a good sign. Zamula is the one that sat. And
Right.
I think that looking at what happened with that, we had said multiple times that Zamula should be taken off the power play unit,
Correct.
not that he should be taken out of the game. And
Right.
so
But I
that's
didn't
I
mind
think
if
you
it
were missing
happened for a game. If it happened for just a
him.
game, that's fine. but you're playing a faster team here. So having Eric Johnson in there, guys like Nick
Mhm.
Delorier, it doesn't help you. And the Flyers' speed wasn't good in this game. It didn't match up.
Well,
They got
that's
outplayed.
in just the Habs game. I think, we need to kind of look a little bit bigger picture of the weekend in
Oh,
its
no, I get it, but you have to
entirety.
match up what you match up to. But
Oh,
yes,
sure,
yeah,
sure. I agree with that point.
because I have a
Absolutely.
problem with the coaching matchups just in general now.
Right. So, given all that,
Mhm.
putting Andrae in this particular game, I think was the right move. I
It
think,
was.
they needed to make the call up and put him in the game. That was the key part. And I think, for his first game back, he did pretty well.
No, he did good. I mean, he actually made a great stretch pass to Lawton too.
Mhm.
No, he had a really good game. He was playing physical. His clears were good. He belonged.
Yeah, and especially when, they're trying to do some, perimeter work to try and score
Yeah,
toward the end. He was a big part of that, and I
yeah,
think made some really good decisions
he did.
there. So, I was impressed by that. I think, obviously the other big call up that happened and big point of contention, you might say, is the Aleksei Kolosov call up. And I think that, we talk about the Lehigh Valley Phantoms pretty extensively on this show
Yes.
because it's important for covering our developing
Yeah.
prospects. Alexei Kolosov has been a huge part of the story for the Phantoms going into this season. And having watched every single one of his Phantoms games, I was absolutely adamant that the call up now was not the right move. And I
Yeah.
think it kind of played out that way.
It did, and you were right, and I felt that way too. And I had only seen him one game. You had seen him more. Yeah, my feeling
Mhm.
was, and I get it. Like Dan Milstein did all these posts on Twitter, and I get it that he could go back to Minsk if that is happening. So I guess there was going to be a point where he was going to play a game, right? But this isn't the time for
No.
a lot of different reasons, for a multitude of reasons. Uh, I get it. He's the first Belarusian to now, start an any goalie to start an NHL game. Great. Dan Milstein could put that up in big, bold, and gold letters like he did on Twitter. But he didn't do his client any service by letting him be called up today, now, while the Flyers are in flux and they're the worst team in the conference. Is that really how you wanted to do it? And my feeling was he's not a bad goalie. People misunderstand when you say stuff on Twitter too.
Right.
It's like, but you can't make him blameless in this either. Like I saw some things that I see NHL goalies not doing. He was shying away from the puck when it was on his stick, even on the power play. One time he got it stolen away from him. Lucky it wasn't, anything more than just a miss. It wasn't just it didn't go in the back of the net. When he got a post, he was clearly beaten on that. When even Brian Boucher talked about how he's supposed to adjust when, even though Gallagher had that play where his stick broke, he has to adjust and go to the other side. He knows the puck is going to the other side. He got there late. You know, these are things for him to work on, but not at the NHL level.
Right, and it just the timing wasn't right. I'm not saying
No,
he wouldn't eventually deserve a call up or, warrant a
right, but
call up here, but
give him a body of work, some
yeah.
confidence there for the few people that were saying, well, sometimes you could bring someone up from the AHL to the NHL and it works out. Yes, with positional players, I don't see that happening with goalies.
No, and if you watched his games with the Phantoms, there were definitely some struggles, there were definitely some stops that he should have made that he didn't, and he was really working on adjusting to some timing. Like, we all know he can move side to
Oh
side,
yeah, he
but
makes some great saves. There's no doubt.
like we saw, sometimes he doesn't cut off the post the way
Yeah,
he should. Sometimes he's a little bit slow to make some decisions. So even though he can physically get across quickly, he doesn't mentally get over there soon enough. And sometimes he goes a little too far out. Sometimes he sinks a little too like these are
right.
all things that he needs to work on. And I am very confident that he will get to be a very good goaltender
Yeah, I
at
don't
at the
doubt that he'll
NHL
be
level.
good. No question.
But then there's this other issue of the timing that we need to talk about on 2 other fronts, right?
Yeah.
So the first front is the Flyers, despite having that very exciting win against the Wild, which
Yeah.
was a lot of fun,
Hmm.
really, really good time. But that was like their first win since the opener, right?
Right.
So the Flyers have struggled defensively over the course of the beginning of this season.
Yes.
When your defense is struggling and then you finally put a good game together and then you put in a fresh goaltender where you have to adjust to their style of play on a back to back, like that's asking for trouble,
It
right?
is. There's no question. But we know other things were at play. We talked about them. What may be, we don't know for sure, but it's just not ideal. And that's why I just wouldn't have picked this time to evaluate them. That's
Right.
all. I definitely would have done it this year. And if they could have held off like 5 more games for him in the AHL, it would have helped him. I guarantee it. And maybe the Flyers would have their act together, or maybe they wouldn't. But he would feel more comfortable.
Right. And then on the Ivan Fedotov side of things, this is going to be a real sticker in his confidence, right?
Oh yeah, this doesn't
And
help him.
no, and I think that he had started to get a little better in that last game he played and now did not have a chance to build on that. I understand people are very skeptical of him
Sure.
and rightfully so in a lot of ways. However, I really feel like this is worse for him than playing him again.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're going to have a guy struggle a little bit at the NHL level and they're both new at it, better to have the 27-year-old
Mhm.
struggling than the 22-year-old.
Who can handle it much better because
Correct.
he's been around longer to
Yeah.
be able to manage that. So, yeah, I think those are kind of like the big things that we learned this weekend. We're going to talk more about the games against the Wild and the Habs and some other players, special teams, and all of that coming up next. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can even double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as little as 15 minutes. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. PrizePicks, run your game. On tomorrow's show, we are going to preview the Flyers' next matchup against the Boston Bruins. Some very interesting things going on up there. Plus, it's Phantoms Tuesday, and so we're talking about Kolosov today. We're going to talk about so much more on tomorrow's show, and we'll get to your mailbag questions on Wednesday. So get them in. Email us at lockedonflyers@gmail. You can send us a message on Twitter or comment on our YouTube channel. So, Russ, I think that, obviously that game versus the Wild was pretty prolific in scoring and uh, wasn't quite so much in the game against the Habs, of course, until the
No.
end, where only the Travises were allowed to score in that game. But I think it sort of begs the question because after Saturday, people were like, oh, is this Konecny, Couturier, Michkov the line they should stick with the guys playing off wing, right? So versus the Wild, they scored 12 points combined. But in the game against the Habs, they were actually upside down on shot attempts at 5 on
Yeah.
5. So they allowed more shot attempts than they had themselves. And so I think, it's tough to tell because we haven't had enough data with them like this. And that's why we've been saying stay consistent. But do you think we should stick with this line?
I mean, if you do, it's not going to last all season because Sean Couturier is going to wind down. You're going to have him on 1C. He's doing already too much like fighting and other stuff instead of like being the 1C. He's trying to be the ultimate leader there, and I give him all the credit. But he's getting involved in too much shenanigans with, especially a team like Montreal, who's got guys that they just live for that, like in Gallagher and Jack Eye and all those guys, right? So
Well, but sometimes he scores goals and gets a hat trick too.
no,
So,
I get it. Well, that was the first time in 32 games. We'll see if he does it again. But the point
right.
is, he's going to score some, but I think he's going to wind down, and they need him on this team and to lead young players. So I'm still thinking I wouldn't do it. I mean, I still would put Frost with him. And if you want to occasionally pop in Couturier for some faceoffs, fine. But I don't know. Last I looked, Frost was playing with Hathaway and Delorier again. And I'm thinking, what did he do in life to make that happen? Because he was the only one who could control the puck, skate, and do everything. And there's no way the coaching staff could look at that and say, I like this line. It's got a lot of chemistry.
Well, it was interesting because obviously with Frost dropping from the second line to the fourth line between those two games, he got easier face-off opponents and did very well at the time,
Sure,
right?
of course.
But so the stats are a little inflated there, but nonetheless, like you saw in various circumstances when Frost got in there, he was doing all he could. And I think Hathaway could hang with him to some extent, but he did not have a complete line to work with. And
No.
he can't be successful in that circumstance. So, I mean, I do think like going back to the Michkov, like
Mhm.
what should his line be part of it? I think your point is fair that really I like this Couturier line with Konecny and Michkov a lot, but I think it would behoove them to maybe move Frost up to 3C and then swap out the centers for like every third shift or so,
Sure.
or every
Something like
fourth
that's fine
shift.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the better way to do it, just so that they can change the dynamic a little bit, but still have some consistency for Michkov.
Yeah. Because you could see, like, in this game back to back, Couturier was having slow moments.
Mhm.
He was. And that's where that would help that.
Right. Right. I think so. So I think, you know, to be continued on Michkov's ideal line here, but
Yeah.
I did think it was very interesting, that what we just talked about, that Frost and Cates inverted between the two games.
Right.
And I thought Cates had a very good game against the Wild,
He did.
but I was still just like, wow, that's really interesting moving him up. Like, what did you think about his performance against the Habs, and could he hang in the top 6?
I thought he hung. I didn't notice good or bad,
Right. That's
which
kind of
sometimes
how
is
I
good.
feel.
He's just not gonna, give people the offense that they thought he was gonna do. But I think they have to give up on that. But as far as skating and playing and not making mistakes, he's good at that.
Yeah, I think so. So you're right. Sometimes not noticing somebody is a good thing,
Yeah.
because for that reason. But I still really feel strongly that Frost needed to be higher up in the lineup,
He
and
did because he was.
Paling at 4C is the way to go.
Yes. And Paling's banged up now. Like, he is
Mhm.
not playing well.
No, no. Want to talk a little bit about the blue line, because we've now seen the Sanheim Risto pairing
Yeah.
again for a little bit. And Risto absolutely elevated his game against the Wild and was a huge
Yes.
factor there. It was talked about that because of Cam York's absence, that he was kind of given a talking to, saying like, you got to step up now, because those are big shoes to fill, or big skates to fill, I guess.
Yeah.
But what do you think about his game versus the Habs, though?
Was mediocre, but I loved his passing against the Wild. Like,
Mhm,
that's when he was making the Flyers
mhm.
look faster, when he was getting passes to guys in stride. He's kind of like fell in the mud in the Habs game, and I think again he's not slow, he's not fast, and back to back he's probably slower. And the Habs played back to back too, but they were much faster, and so like
Right.
that, I think that affected him. I mean, and I do want to point out one play because I just want to forget this. This play was in my mind. There was a point when Nick Deslauriers, you're the home team. Nick Deslauriers was out on the ice with Lane Hudson. Nick Delorier could not even get near the puck when Lane Hudson had the puck. And I was just looking and I was thinking, who had this matchup in mind? What did they think would happen? And they were lucky. Hudson could have scored a few times, but he was just all over the place, and Delorier was barely moving. I was just like, this is comical.
Well, and that's when you're talking about game planning, that's the difference between facing the Wild and facing the Habs.
Right.
I mean, obviously Kaprizov is phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
And very dangerous, but the Habs have multiple very, very, very fast skaters.
They do.
And so I think that you have to prepare differently and have a different lineup perhaps. And so I did question why Delorier was in the game again against the Habs.
Yeah, no question. And look, I don't think this was the Flyers' worst game, but I do think they went to sleep from 9 minutes into the second period for most of the third period, and you can't do
Like,
that.
no, and it was great when they actually showed up, but like do that 5 to 10 minutes earlier and maybe
Right,
you had a shot in
right,
this thing, right?
right. And
And
now the losses are piling up, no matter how you do it. Like we could say, hey, this looks better, that looks better, this is worse, that's worse, but they're at the bottom. And when you're at the bottom, things change. The dynamic of your team changes. That's another reason why it's good that Luchanko's not there. And it's another reason why you
Mhm.
don't want to have a young backup there. Because when
Yeah.
things are going like this is not the time to have a guy like that, like in his first few games. It's not great. Andrae, he can handle it. He played overseas. He was a
Yep.
pro. No problem for a guy like that.
He was on the Phantoms. He can
Right.
handle it,
No,
right?
and yeah, exactly. So, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. But yes, so I just think all those things matter. And right now, the Flyers play for each other. I don't know how much they're playing for John Tortorella.
Well, yeah, I think that what he's putting together isn't matching up with what they need on a game by game basis.
No.
100%. I do like he has it in him to have the right lineup. Like he's
Hmm.
done it before, and I've never really complained much about it before. Other than like disagreeing with him, but at
Sure.
least I knew where he was coming from with
Right.
the decision he was making. And some of these I don't understand where he's coming from. So I think that's a big difference um, this year. But I think, as long as they got each other, I think that's a sitcom theme song lyric. Uh,
Should be.
um, but at any rate, I think that, they do have the same togetherness, and that's something that's important to take forward,
It is.
for the future. But yeah, a real interesting weekend with a lot going on. Talked about a lot of it, but obviously there will be more fallout from all
Oh
of
yeah.
that coming up this weekend. We'll talk about it as the week continues because we got a lot of action. We are going to turn to our favorite segment of every week, or mine, whatever you want to call it, the nemesis of the week. And we will do that coming up next.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can get $5 and get 150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I would take the Texans over the Jets this week. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. You'll start with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right. Before we get to our nemesis, just want to talk a little bit about the Gritty 5K, which took place Saturday morning. And unfortunately, I was not there in person this year like I was last year, but apparently it was the biggest ever. Lots of fun with lots of cake and shenanigans along the route as per usual.
People were
I did
getting
it.
cake thrown at them. Like there was a big mess.
Ah, love it. Love it.
Although
And
the problem is, and I was talking about this in the press box, if I know I want to get hit with a cake, I got to bring another shirt or a towel. Like I'm not walking in this game with like cake on
That's
me.
true.
You know what I mean? Like even if I wipe it off, it's gonna be cake all over me. I don't want to do that.
Totally. But I did mine remotely. I have the medal to prove it.
There you go.
And love doing it every year. And hopefully I can be there in person next year and maybe get a cake from Gritty this time around. Turning to our nemesis of the week. Last week, I talked about having 2 back-to-backs in a week after a rough start to the season and complained about the schedule. And then, like the next day, Tortorella said the same thing. It was pretty funny. But you complained about the weather and that there was too big of a just swath
Disparity
of,
between
of temperature at different
yeah.
points in the day. I said you were silly for doing that because it's really not that hard to prepare for changes in temperature in a single day. This time around, like I do want to look back and say that my nemesis kind of is the lack of time to celebrate a win when you lose the second half of a back-to-back. Like you like to sit in that victory and enjoy
Yeah.
it and be
Yeah.
especially because of how many goals they scored, the hat trick. Michkov is like pretty close, if not the top in the rookie scoring race right now. I think he may be in second after last night, but it's fun. It's really, really fun. And then you have like a buzzkill the next day when they lose the
Yeah.
game. You can't just like marinate in that. But that is looking backward. I like to look forward with my official nemesis of the week. So of course it has to be the Boston Bruins because they're always my nemesis. Let's be real. It could be summer in July and I'll think about the Boston Bruins
They're in
and
your
how
head.
they are in my head. It's real bad. But we faced them twice this week. So, of course, the Bruins.
I'm gonna go with there's this pet peeve I have. The Merriam-Webster dictionary is changing as our language becomes more lax and more slang is used. More of those words get in the dictionary. I don't mind some of them. Some of them are
Mm-hmm.
good for the era and the day and all that. But when something wasn't a word and now it is, it bothers me. And that word is irregardless. It is
I
not.
knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
It is not a word. Regardless is the word. And I'm even starting to see it now on television. And I'm going to give a standing ovation to Elsbeth, the series on CBS, because they didn't go there. They said regardless. And so thank you for holding the line on that, because that is the correct call on it. And look, I'm not the grammar police. I don't care about your Oxford commas and all that. I'm not going to get crazy over that. What I get crazy over is when something is not a word and then everybody uses it like a word. So irregardless is not a word, folks.
Yeah. I met Carrie Preston at New York Comic Con last weekend, by the way. So hope you're jealous of that.
I am.
But
She's good in that.
I
I'm not sure.
she's really, really good. I will say that I used to think like you do right now. And maybe a couple, 2, 3 years ago, I started changing my tune because I listened to a bunch of linguists who have talked about changes in the language and how they materialize and why sometimes words that aren't words become legitimate uses. And that it's okay. And the reasoning behind it is that language is always going to naturally change and all words are made up. All words are made up. And
Mhm.
so why not say if you think irregardless is the best way to express what you are feeling, then use irregardless. I will still use regardless because that is what I know and that is I think, for me, the better word to use. But if in, say, a younger generation or certain
Yeah, I want to
circumstances,
see how they're doing this in school. I get what you're saying, but if little Jimmy goes up and he puts irregardless on his paper in third grade and there's a red line through it, then what's he supposed to do? Because now all of a sudden,
yeah, and I don't know what teachers are
I
doing
don't
with
either.
these
I'd like to know though.
circumstances.
So if people want to give us feedback on that, that
Yeah,
may that may
totally.
be the best answer.
But I absolutely think that languages should be allowed to
Some
develop and
things.
change.
Some things. I just
And
think that's ridiculous.
because I mean, if you
I'm
look
okay with
back,
plenty of other slang. I am.
right, but like you look back and, at least when I was a kid, like bad meant good. And
Mhm.
that's the opposite, just like irregardless is the opposite of regardless, but it means the same thing.
I know, but you
So
know what? Like for someone who comes into this country and has to learn this language, this is the most
English is impossible.
effed up,
English is
messed
a
up language because you have like 3 words that mean different things. There's so many it's just it's hard, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. It's hard. It's hard to adjust, but I have taken a new tact on language and
Alright.
development. Anyway, that was a really interesting little coda to
Yeah.
today's episode. We
Yeah.
will be back tomorrow to talk about the Phantoms as well as the Boston Bruins and what's been going on with them. Little drama. In the meantime, make sure you let us know your mailbag questions. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail. You can let us know on Twitter at lockedonflyers or comment over on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.